I'm Rob Word, and we are doing a special edition of A Word on Westerns right in the middle of Hollywood. We're on the corner of Highland and Hollywood Boulevard for the James Arness Gunsmoke auction with some of the greatest memorabilia, like my James Arness Gunsmoke hat. Now, Dillon, this is not in the auction. This is in my closet. But not in my closet is Janet Arness, who had most of this stuff in your closet.
And I had a storage place with his films from Gunsmoke, the original when they canceled Gunsmoke. Jim started collecting before I met him. And his business manager would bring things in and say, "Oh, Jim, sign this," So after I married Jim, we kind of kept doing that routine, He'd get something from the studio. I'd say, "Oh, Jim, why don't you sign this?" Well, it just grew and grew and grew.
Of course, he had the mugs from the John Wayne movies, too. Are they going to be here in the auction?
They are.
Ooh.
I know.
I might want to bid on one of those.
Sorry, so rare.
Very popular. They are rare. Yeah. What were the films he did?
Sea Chase was one. Hondo.
Big Jim McClane.
Yeah.
Yep. And Hawaii. Yes. Yeah.
See, you're good, Rob.
Well, I may buy that one for my brother who lives in Hawaii.
Oh, my God. Well, that's where Jim first learned to surf with John Wayne's brother. They got there in Hawaii and rented surfboards, and they went out when they had a day off and learned how to surf.
A friend of mine, Don Stroud, an actor who did a Gunsmoke, he was a world champion surfer, born in Hawaii, and he remembers Jim surfing there when he was a teenager. And so then when he did a Gunsmoke, he mentioned that to Jim, and Jim goes, "Oh, Mahaha," or Machaha.
Machaha. Jim had a place there.
We're going in.
Hey, look, Bruce Boxleitner's here too.
Come on, Janet. We're going in.
Julian's Auction House hosted a Golden Age Western prop auction in Hollywood and online November 15th, 2024 at the world-famous Hollywood Museum in the historic Max Factor building. We were invited to a reception held the night before to showcase displays of items for the Gunsmoke and Western Legends auction. It mainly featured the collection of Gunsmoke's James Arness, with over 230 items direct from the estate offered for the first time. There were also several collectibles from Gunsmoke's other legendary cast members, Burt Reynolds and Dennis Weaver. The Arness items were a treasure trove of goodies and included wardrobes, scripts, pistols, holsters, set pieces, magazine covers, comic books, games, and other collectibles that Jim had gathered and signed over his 60-year career. With us for this special episode of A Word on Westerns was Jim's wife, Janet Arness, and Bruce Boxleitner, who co-starred with Jim in the final episode of Gunsmoke, the classic series How the West Was Won, the remake of Red River, and the final Gunsmoke made-for-TV movie. For Bruce, seeing the Arness collection brought back fond memories of working with his mentor and show business giant.
Yeah, the long coat, the gray coat with the where he's wearing a string tie there. It's like a dress coat. He wore that in the movie, the last Gunsmoke movie. That was the last thing Jim did. But I think he probably used it in several of them.
Oh, yes. He also used it in a wedding scene.
A wedding scene, yeah, for his daughter. Was it? Did he? Right. And he also wore one in Gunsmoke when they had occasional, like there'd be a party.
Yeah.
They're in the black and white ones yet. A party at the Long Branch.
I was watching one the other day, and it was Kitty's birthday, and he had to leave to go chase down Victor French, and who was after his daughter who had been kidnapped by the Indians, but it was sort of like the Searchers, except that his daughter, and he was a racist, Victor French.
That was a good one.
And she was actually an Indian.
The boots look right.
The Marshal's badges, one is from the beginning of Gunsmoke, and then later on they switched it and made it a little different.
I want to bid for that Arvo Ojala holster. I'll bet it's gone.
Tell us about Arvo Ojala. Was he the one in the shootout at the beginner?
Yes, he was. He was in that famous opening. You actually see him before you ever actually see Jim until Jim steps into the foreground, but it's only at his back. He was a gun coach, but he also developed the fast draw holster. He was responsible for that. You know that.
Yes.
And that was what became the rage when the fast draw thing became the rage in the 50s, starting with Gunsmoke and Wyatt Earp and all those songs.
To make it the fast draw, he put metal in the leather and the...
Yes, he made it, yeah. In the holster, the actual, where the gun actually goes in was kind of molded to the gun. And, it was a molded holster. It wasn't just some old flap thing that just stuck. And then it also had an elongation where it went down the leg a little bit more. So it was more at your hand here. Now, in reality, cowboys they wore it high up so it didn't lose it in the brush.
And they'd shoot people in the back.
Yeah, right. But
There's also a holster from Hondo, and it's from Bad Jack's production.
no, Jim Arness was quite a prankster. He loved to pull little jokes and stuff like that. Now, if he let he'd take his sideburns off. Everybody was always there. Every department was always there to get what they needed, props and makeup. But if they weren't, he'd make like he was going to go, and they'd be running there to get there. But he was quite a prankster. And the gun belt, you'd unlatch the gun belt and down it would go if somebody wasn't there. So if there was a prop assistant, they knew to be there right away and catch it from in back right there. And thank you, Jim. And off they'd go.
How about that pistol, Bruce?
Yeah, it always kind of looked as big as it looks here. And if we put it in Janet's hands, it would look like a rifle. In Jim's hand, that big, beefy hand he had, he could take that thing and it swallowed it up.
So that hat, though.
That's exactly it. Yeah, that was his Zeb from the Machahans.
Yeah, didn't we have you wearing that hat over at Janet's house?
No, I actually had one like you're wearing. It was a Matt Dillon hat. But this is definitely it. I think this knife was one of the Tarzan knives.
Oh.
That's what Jim and talked about that when they got this. They needed a big buoy for him too because it would look like a pocket knife once it got out in his hand. Now that's a big knife, right? Jim was a big man. I mean, let's face it, and he had to have things that wouldn't look too small.
Years before he became Matt Dillon, Jim was a World War II veteran and Purple Heart recipient. His actual uniform was in the collection. Remember the terrific sci-fi thriller The Thing? Well, Jim was in that too as the alien intruder who threatens Kenneth Tobey and his colleagues. Jim autographed a poster for The Thing on the auction block here. Soon after The Thing, Jim had a starring role in the cult classic thriller Them, hunting giant mutated ants in the desert and cities of California. The incredible one-sheet poster was also autographed by Jim. Even vintage lunchboxes autographed by Jim were in the auction. Matt Dillon's ensemble worn by Arness included the salmon cotton button-up shirt with rounded collar points, suede vest, tan trouser, and a pair of suede boots featuring a studio tag and Arness's signature on each boot. The tag reads, J. Arness, property of studio, CBS Studio Center, Gunsmoke, and Demure Shirt Makers, custom made to measure, and features the initials J.A. There was Arness's Matt Dillon Gunsmoke hat with brown leather sweatband signed by James Arness and inscribed Matt with a black Sharpie. Janet said to shape his hats, Jim would go into the shower, get the hat wet, and then he'd shape it. There's even a clapperboard from Gunsmoke 3 to the Last Man, signed by Jim and other cast and crew members. One of the original stitched leather Arbo Ojala quick-draw holsters used by Arness in the series was available. Signed by Arness and stamped by Ojala, who is best known as the unnamed opponent that Marshal Dillon faced in the duel during the opening credits of the early shows that began each episode. Ojala was a quick-draw specialist. He designed and patented the holster style and rigging, teaching many a movie and TV cowboy how to draw and shoot fast. One of the pistols with the Stag grip used by Arness's Matt Dillon was also in the auction. The pistol grips were originally made of bone but kept cracking and needed to be replaced, so the producers decided to create grips made of plastic. It sure looked authentic. Arness was honored several times by the Cowboy Hall of Fame in Oklahoma City with a Western Heritage Wrangler Award, a figure in bronze of a cowboy mounted on a horse that sits on a wooden base. The auction were original items from other popular Western series, Bonanza and Rawhide. During Rawhide's long run, the opening credits changed several times. For the 7th season, the title sequence showcased the 3 main leads, Eric Fleming, Clint Eastwood, and Paul Brinegar, by featuring the stars in spectacular slow-motion action, dissolving into the plaster bust that appeared next to the actor's name. These original Rawhide busts sold for $7,620. To see the entire collection that we've previewed in this episode of A Word on Westerns, go to juliansoptions.com and search Arness. Thanks to Julian's Options, Bruce Boxleitner, and Janet Arness for allowing us to see the historic items in the James Arness collection. Thanks for watching.
Hi, welcome to A Word on Westerns. My name is Rob Word, and we have a special show today because our guest is Mr. Al Frisch, who is a collector of movie guns. And he brought today Matt Dillon's gun. Let's hear it for Al Frisch. Welcome, Al. So tell us about what you have here.
Well, I've got a little preamble at how I acquired this stuff. Robert Peterson Publishing wanted to, and this was in 1998, 99, wanted to have a firearms museum here like his automotive museum. Well, the Board of Supervisors and the City Council, being anti-firearm, said no, 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 and no again. So he thought if he bought the inventory of Stembridge, which had spent 50-some years on the Paramount lot, and they were the main supplier of firearms to the whole movie and TV industry. Anyway, so he thought if he bought those 12,000 odd guns, he'd build a Hollywood wing of the museum and they'd go for it. Well, they said no, no, and no again. So in that interim between him purchasing it and them telling him no finally, I was hired to go in and fix the broken guns, identify noteworthy stuff for the museum, and essentially build the contents of a museum. Well, I was there 6 weeks. He came and looked at it, wasn't impressed because he was used to buying the best. I mean, he was a billionaire and he bought the very best in the way of firearms. And a lot of the stuff there was just movie stuff, you know, scopes with no lenses and rifles that had been screwed up. You know, hundreds and hundreds of busted guns. Anyway, in that 6 weeks, I found him some 600 or 700 notable firearms. One of which was the big Walker that Maddie had in True Grit. Phil Spangenberger had supplied me a great color photo. Could not find that gun anywhere. Then I found it down the bottom of a lugger of busted, dismantled guns. And it ultimately went to the NRA, I think, for close to $100,000 at auction. Anyway, so I was there after the 6 weeks when he traded it off to his agent, who made me a small percentage partner. And that's how I acquired my several hundred guns. There were some 60-odd years worth of documents, the rental invoices with serial numbers of the leather as well as the guns and everything else.
Was Matt Dillon's gun in that group?
Yes, several of them were. Which I did. In that 6-week period, I wasn't able to identify everything, of course, because we ended up with 300 file boxes of documents, of the receipts, the rental invoices. And to go through all of those and check all the inventory, none of it was computerized, so it wasn't easy. It was all by hand. Anyway, so I acquired a lot of stuff. This is one of 2 Festus guns. I've sold one. It's a Colt in .45 caliber, 5.5 inch, made in the 1880s. And this was one of several Arness firearms documented to his use actually later than this holster was used. You see this holster on a lot of the Dell comic book covers. of the Gunsmoke comic books, as well as there's a famous photo that's been around of Matt, Chester, and Hoppy standing on the porch, or a porch, boardwalk, at Melody Ranch, where they filmed the first 6 years worth, with the exteriors before they went down and built the street at CBS. Anyway, it's a 4440, 7.5-inch Colt. Later, they went to the plastic Stag grips. You remember the white ones with the black marks that virtually every TV program had one or two people using guns like that. They were made by Franzite. Roy Rogers told me he even switched to them because the good jigged horn grips would break and you couldn't replace them. They just weren't to be found, whereas $5 bought you a set of the Franzites. And so when he was doing his TV show, he was using the Franzites on his. And he told me some days they may have to replace 6 grips, just depending on how strenuous, lots of fights or whatever.
How many guns, how many pistols did Jim Arness go through on the show?
Well, I don't have all the documents, but I've documented 7.
How many of them do you have?
I owned 3. I sold 2.
What's something like this valued at today?
Well, the last one that was resold after I sold it, I understand about $57,000, something around there. Plus the 15 or 20% that goes to the auctioneer.
Thank you for being here, Al.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Hi, I'm Rob Word. Thanks for watching A Word on Westerns. Each week we post a new episode, and all you have to do is subscribe right here. Click on this. You won't miss a one. Adios.